To understand the Battle of Alberta between Edmonton and Calgary, we need to travel back in time and explore the origins of the rivalry. We will discover stories of the Cree and Blackfoot, the settlement of the West, and the ever-important railway route. Digging a little deeper, we'll reveal the significance of Edmonton becoming the capital and the creation of the University of Alberta. Continuing on our journey, we will discover how the rivalry spilled over into industry from Turner Valley to Leduc No. 1, while fueling the feud with our various sports teams. The ongoing Battle of Alberta between Edmonton and Calgary has forged a bond that has made Alberta stronger and more resilient to change.
Calgary at the time in 1960 was around 250,000 people. Edmonton was closer to 450,000. Now Calgary's bigger than Edmonton. So in the last 60 years, it's quadrupled and Edmonton's doubled. When the oil started rolling along in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, everyone went to Calgary and it became the head office city. Edmonton remained the government or the service industry.
The peoples of the Northern Boreal Forest, and to a lesser extent the Aspen Parkland, led a subarctic lifestyle which involved trapping fur-bearing animals and traveling by canoe, which made the region a natural fit for the fur trade. By contrast, the plains cultures on the prairie to the south relied on the buffalo. The predominant political force on the prairie during the fur trade, the Blackfoot Confederacy, would not allow the Hudson's Bay Company to establish itself within Blackfoot territory, preferring to ride to Edmonton House, established in 1795 to trade. Around this time, some Cree and allied peoples, the Iron Confederacy, pushed south onto the plains and became rivals of the Blackfoot. By the 1810s, the Battle River was the disputed frontier between the two groups. I moved here in 2000, December of 2000, moving to Edmonton in the middle of winter, and I can remember people saying to me, "Why are you moving to Edmonton? Why would you move to Edmonton? Dedmonton? Why wouldn't you go to Calgary?" That's when I first found out about that rivalry, when I first realized that there was a rivalry between the two cities. And I've seen it nonstop for 16 years that I've been here.
When I became a lawyer in 1959, you could see that there was some tension and as between not only the bar in Calgary and the bar in Edmonton, and also the judges. The judges really didn't like to come to Edmonton from Calgary, and it probably was the same for the Edmonton judges, not really liking to go to Calgary. There was that subtle kind of a rivalry. A Calgary lawyer would say, "Oh well, he's a lawyer from Edmonton, we can deal with him." So there was a belittling kind of rivalry that existed, and this was very noticeable in the legal profession, but that's gradually disappeared.
Calgary was founded as a Northwest Mounted Police fort and was not much of a settlement at all until the mid-1880s, and the Canadian Pacific Railway suddenly shifted its planned route across Western Canada from a northern one through Edmonton to a more southerly path through Calgary. Therefore, the economic and cultural origins of Calgary and its region were created by the Northwest Mounted Police and the Canadian Pacific Railway, not the Hudson's Bay Company. Because of the CPR line, Calgary's agricultural hinterland was settled much sooner, mostly by people of British and particularly Scottish origins. But it also has an American influence because of the ranching culture brought into the region by American cowboys. By contrast, Edmonton's hinterland is marked by a French-Canadian and Métis presence and is predominantly occupied by people of non-British European origins.
People have to understand that we are a nation of broad characters and different nationalities and different religions, and that we have to have a sense of not only tolerance, but an understanding of what has to be done so that we live in a peaceful nation, so that we don't have attitudes where we're condemning one segment of society and prepared to live with another. We can't separate each other. We have to join each other.
Following the debate over the CPR, the next important contest between the two cities was to determine which would become Alberta's capital when the province was created in 1905. By this time, two new transcontinental railways had been built, both through Edmonton, under the guidance of a federal Liberal government that had replaced the Conservative government which had overseen construction of the CPR. Equally important, the Liberals overhauled Canada's immigration system. Whereas the Conservatives had endeavoured to restrict Western settlement to British immigrants, the Liberals had encouraged immigration from other parts of Europe. Thus, by the turn of the century, the differing political leanings of Calgary and Edmonton that persist to this day, that is, with Calgary being quite conservative by Canadian standards and Edmonton tending to be more liberal, were already well established. Not surprisingly, then, when the federal Liberal government admitted Alberta to Confederation in 1905, they named Edmonton the capital. However, the people of Calgary were infuriated when Edmonton's neighbour, the then separate city of Strathcona, won the right to host the University of Alberta.
Edmonton had it all when I was a youngster. Calgary didn't even have a university. So that started, U of C, they started in 67, 68. In fact, my partner, Mike Barnett, that's where he went to university. And I actually saw him play for the U of C Dinos against the Golden Bears. Of course, I was a big Golden Bear fan. I remember him lunging into a fight one night, and he was like the evil guy, right? I found out later he was a pretty good guy. But Edmonton had it all. You know, we a lot of outdoor sports. We didn't have many arenas at that point, nor did Calgary, of course. Calgary didn't have much of a downtown back then either. It was pretty sedate, as was Edmonton's. But we had a government, we had the ledge, we had a university. So growing up in Edmonton, in my mind, we had lots of lakes around it. It was a great place to be a kid.
Calgary built the first big shopping center, the Crescent Shopping Center on the south side. But when Edmonton then developed West Edmonton Mall, the biggest shopping center in North America, Calgary started to say, what do we do with this? How do we meet this?
The final important rivalry between the cities during Alberta's early years was over economic leadership, especially in the oil patch. Calgary's nearby Turner Valley deposits were discovered in 1914, decades before Edmonton's Leduc No. 1 field in 1947. This, in part, accounts for the much larger concentration of head offices of large corporations in Calgary. Edmonton's business community contains more private corporations working in oil and gas, consulting, and smaller operations. I was amazed. I had not grown up in a city where there was an NHL team. That rivalry between the Oilers and the Flames, being outside doing stand-ups or live hits outside a game, and you have all the fans coming in. I had never seen anything like this before. Today, although the rivalry is generally shown only during sporting events, there remains an unspoken, friendly rivalry between residents that remains on a subtle level.
It was really interesting to watch Calgary grow when I was down there. There was nothing they couldn't do. It was a real can-do city. Their rate of growth, their ideas, their perception of getting whatever they wanted was very profound.
In recent years, one of the most intense and passionate expressions of this rivalry is the frequent matchups between the professional NHL teams and football clubs based in each city, the Oilers and Flames, and the Eskimos and Stampeders.
Well, those days when the Oilers were dominating the National Hockey League and winning their 5 cups in a row, the consensus among National Hockey League people was that the second best team in the league was usually the Calgary Flames, you know, who weren't fortunate enough to be in a different division and go deeper in the playoffs. But there were so many exceptional talents that later went on to be Hall of Famers from both teams. You know, they were so well coached, so well managed. You know, you're not going to find a smarter bench operator than a Glenn Sather or a Bob Johnson. And they dueled it out, you know, every year in best of 7 series. It was well worth the price of admission to hockey fans. And Hockey Night in Canada just, lived for that matchup every year.
The rivalry was especially bitter in the second half of the 1980s.
Part of what made the rivalry be what it's been is the 200-odd miles on the highway up and down north to south that so many of the fans were capable of doing, of getting tickets in the bad guys building, that, it made the rivalry even greater because they would see their home team playing as a visitor. And, there were always loud, competitive fans sitting in the same section as the hometown fans. So, I remember a lot of occasions. It really was extremely physical, the series, and, representing quite a few players on both teams. It was a first-hand look at just how prepared they were to put it all on the line to try to win that most important series, to get beyond that rivalry, and in some cases it got easier after that.
One of the two teams represented the Campbell Conference in the Stanley Cup Finals for 8 consecutive years, from 1983 to 1990, the Oilers 6 times, the Flames twice. The Oilers won 5 of those 7 cups, a feat that has not been repeated since. They are recognized as the NHL's last dynasty, with lineups that featured legends like Wayne Gretzky, Grant Fuhr, Paul Coffey, and Mark Messier. The only time the Flames won the Stanley Cup during that period was in 1989, led by superstars Lanny McDonald, Doug Gilmour, and Mike Vernon.
As we get into the 80s, Cliff Fletcher himself, I heard him say it because he said it to me, the way to the Stanley Cup is through Edmonton. If we can't beat Edmonton, we're never going to get to the Stanley Cup. So he designed a team completely around playing the Edmonton Oilers. Didn't care about the rest of the league. Without beating Edmonton, they weren't going anywhere. And if they finally did it.
Well, it certainly wasn't hard to represent the type of players and athletes and people that we were fortunate to be involved with, because first and foremost, they were a product of their upbringing, invariably close families, well educated on the theory of giving back to the community. And it's not by accident that many of them, have stayed in that community. Lanny McDonald is in the streets of Calgary all the time. Kevin Lowe in Edmonton, they continue to give back long after their playing careers. And there's dozens of those type of players in both cities. And I'm sure that continues to perpetuate the rivalry as well, because if you get around any of those guys, it only takes about 10 seconds and the stories start to come out. So it's a wonderful history, but it continues to be built upon every day and every week and every year.
From the ice to the grass, the first game between the current Stampeders and Eskimos franchises was also the first game in Eskimos history, and the defending Grey Cup Stampeders defeated the Eskimos 20-6 on Labor Day. With the exception of a few, the Eskimos and Stampeders have played on Labor Day every year since 1949. This has been one of the Canadian Football League's marquee matchups, as the Labor Day Classic in Calgary was followed by the Friday night rematch in Edmonton, resulting in a quick turnaround for both teams. Between 1990 and 2003, the two teams clashed 9 times to decide who would represent the West in the Grey Cup, and at least one Alberta team was in the game every time. While the Stampeders may have won the Grey Cup first, the Eskimos have won the most recent and the most, with 14 titles compared to the Stampeders' 7 as of 2015.
People think of the rivalry being most established, but let me tell you, I remember as a youngster as well being taken down, fortunately, to Mowata Stadium to see the Eskimos and Jackie Parker and Johnny Bright and Normie Kwong coming in on Labor Day long weekend to play the Stampeders, and going up to Clark Stadium and seeing the two teams play up there. That, I believe it was before I was born, but certainly the history of the Stampeders going east with their great fans, shipping chuck wagons on CPR rail to be able to put the flapjack breakfast on in downtown Yonge Street and Bay Street in Toronto. That's all part of what the Alberta history is all about, and it's every bit as strong in the CFL as it is in the NHL.
You had the Calgary Stampeders, who had a pretty good squad in the 70s, in the early 70s, but no one was going to beat Edmonton from 1976 to about 84. They didn't lose to anybody. In fact, they won 5 straight Grey Cups. They lost the Ice Bowl in 77 to Montreal. They were the team of the West. And Calgary couldn't get by them. They couldn't get by them. So that's a familiar theme. That's why I bring it up.
I think out of sibling rivalries, some good comes out of it. And really, the good that comes out of it is that you end up ultimately becoming friends. You forgive each other for what you would call the foolishness of the way you thought in the past and the way you may have treated each other. And to this day, some of my best friends, of course, are from Calgary.
Like that of any sibling rivalry, the Battle of Alberta has made both cities stronger. It has tested them, and in the long run, both Edmonton and Calgary have become more rounded and certainly more resilient.